This is the Your Sports Resource Podcast, where each week you'll learn actionable strategies that you can implement so the operations of your club support your coaching staff and the direction of your organization. We are committed to excellence in youth sports leadership. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Your Sports Resource Podcast. Today, Matt and I are going to talk about membership growth and how you navigate that situation from keeping the ones that you already have, the members you already have, and how you find new members. All right, Matt, I'm just going to toss it over to you. You want to get going?
Yeah. So, it's growth and recruitment, something that I feel like all clubs should be doing on a regular basis. And if your club is not, probably something you want to, kind of start making a priority if growth is one of your goals. It's
Right.
not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take, quite a bit of planning and some thought to be put in it. And, so it's trying to figure out then what are you, what's the best way to reach potential members? How, understanding what your club has to offer these people, like that,
Right.
That's a huge part of it as well. But yeah, I think today, one of the main things that, that we'll talk about here is retention, because, it could be oftentimes that the largest group available to you are the people who are actually leaving your club, for whatever reason. And where I mean that is they were interested at some point to come out for your club. And so, they have an interest potentially in the sport, and you've gotten them through the door once. So, as an organization, it's kind of that thought process of it's going to require you to kind of look at your members and kind of know what are they getting out of their experience and why did they join the club in the first place. And there's probably a few ways we can do it. So we're not, I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on, kind of collecting that type of information?
Well, I think a lot of times when clubs lose members, they jump to the conclusion that it's the coach's fault or a coach's fault, the coach of that group, their fault. And I think that one good way to understand, the reality of the situation of why your members are leaving, and it doesn't matter if it's just one here and there, or you've got a consistent flow of members leaving. I think it's important for organizations to, you mentioned planning for this, and I think they need to do some form of exit understanding. So whether that's a short survey or maybe your executive director or your admin person picks up the phone and talks to them, because I think there's so many more factors that go into why people join an organization and why they leave an organization. And it's not always, and sometimes it's probably, I would say, it's not even 50% of the time that it has anything to do with the coach. It could be a number of factors. So I think an interview or a survey of sorts would be good.
Yeah. And I think too, one of the things for clubs is to go back and look at kind of what is your retention rate from year to year. And again, this is something that takes time, right? Like it's, hey, we're going to sit down and look at a sample, but look at 3 to 5 years if you can, or if you don't have that, start doing it now, right?
Yeah.
Start collecting that data to know, like, hey, if we're bringing, 50 new members into our club. I know that's a huge number. I'm just throwing something out there, but and only 25 are returning the next year. That's where these surveys are going to kind of come into play, because I totally agree. I mean, as a father of 2 active kids, my kids are in all kinds of activities, and there's a lot of different reasons that we're going to stick with or look to do something different, and that is yes, coaches may be a factor. I personally haven't come across that yet, right? It's been more on, hey, what's the time commitment, what's the what's the location that I need to kind of get to, what is the the competitive season look like? Sometimes that may be just a little bit overwhelming. So looking at the surveys, I think is an awesome idea, to know what are the factors.
Yeah.
And I think in that too, right? Find out, why did they join in the first place,
Yeah.
right? Like that could be part of that survey, and what, I guess, didn't meet potentially their expectations when
Yeah, and
they
there's also the
when they were
financial
there.
implications as well, right? Because swimming's not a cheap sport. As it's structured today, there's other avenues that we'll talk about, but I think that as it's structured today as a competitive year-round sport, financially it is a commitment, especially once they get out of that developmental range. And then the time, right? And I think it's really important for clubs to understand the true understanding of why their members are leaving, because you can't address certain issues if you don't really know what it is, right? So, if it is the coach, then you want to be able to address it. It might not be a coach, it might be another staff member. They may not like the admin person, right? Or it could literally be that it's too expensive and there's too much time commitment from the competitive factor, which might inform you that you have a different type of track, right? A different type of track that you want to offer. So you can still keep the athletes and earn an income, but you're not expecting them to be on that really high commitment competitive track. And I think too, a lot of clubs, they have bonus structures or KPIs built around membership retention. And I think it's a little disingenuous to hold your head coaches to that type of KPI if you don't provide the avenues to understand the metrics, right? Because they can't fix the problem. All they know is they just need to keep recruiting. So
Yeah, it's like spinning your wheels then.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like we
yeah,
don't fix the problem, but we're just gonna, yeah,
yeah,
kind of have bring kids in. And I think a part of it maybe, um I don't know, maybe COVID had something to do with it or not, but it seems like since then, at least, that there's parents who now recognize the fact that I think their kids need to get out, be active.
yeah,
A lot of them had to pull back from activities potentially. So I think as a club, or kind of looking into what are the other avenues that you could possibly go down to
mm,
draw membership in. And we know that this still comes at a pool expense, and there's a coach, but obviously needed to coach any groups. But as far as, and what I'm trying to get at here is that maybe there's more or a less of a competitive group, or I don't want to say non-competitive, because I think there's always that factor of, if you get a kid in the door and get them training, that they can turn into a competitive swimmer. But maybe it is more of a social aspect and more of a fitness aspect to it. So there's that's just one example of another avenue that your
yeah.
club could potentially go down, right? And
And I think that recreational track is something that a lot of clubs are really turning to. And I think, especially for you clubs who are listening that are in an area where you're not the only team, I think and you're competing for members. I think it's important to consider that. Like Matt said, you have to have the pool space and you have to have the coaching time. There are those factors. But I believe that if you are trying to serve the community, live up to your mission and your vision, and you want to keep membership, yes, it might be more affordable, but it is still an opportunity to have swimming be a part of family lives in your community. And like you said, you can always convert someone from the recreational to the competitive. You never know if like they're really going to go, wow, I really love it, but you don't want just people to, if you can help it, I think it would behoove clubs to look at that recreational track, because I think other than that, you're just losing members, right? So should
Mhm.
there be different types of opportunities? And it may be seasonal instead of year round or something, it's got to fit the organization for what that recreational track looks like. So that's an alternative view, an opportunity to keep membership is by doing that
Yeah, and I
recreational.
mean, and if you are looking to grow, I mean, there's that's just not the only way, right?
Hmm.
There's master swimming, there's swim lessons, there's club swim programs out there that have diving clubs associated,
Yeah.
with
Water
them to help,
polo.
draw water polo, exactly, triathlon training. I mean, the
Right.
list can kind of keep going, as creative as you can get, and to the space and coaches you have available. Utilize those for sure. And as we, kind of focus on, like, okay, retention, I think is key, and that's why I wanted to kind of like, hey, let's hit that first, because it's like you've already got those kids in the door. So I think that when your club is looking at, hey, if we're looking at increasing our membership, I think retention should be the first focus for sure. Then obviously those surveys and creating, like, what's the experience those people are having. That's super important. But if you're going to go out and recruit and you need to pick up new kids, then obviously there needs to be a strategy behind that. And then some of the things we're
Yeah.
talking about here, consider, kind of what are those options for those kids, who you want to draw in. And next time, I think this is going to be a two-part kind of podcast, I think, that we're going to kind of do and kind of break it down more into some more detail stuff. But as you're kind of looking at that recruitment strategy, there's some kind of key things to focus in on. And the first thing is, marketing, and, like, how are you reaching people, right? This is
Yeah.
sometimes the first thing that people see, is if there's a flyer or something being sent out to them, like, how is this, being marketed, towards those members that you're trying to reach.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. I think
Well,
the
and in the
second thing.
marketing, I just wanted to add too that I think that it's pretty funny. There's a lot of, like, especially the smaller clubs. I'm like, why are you not on Instagram? Or you
Mhm.
have an account and there's 3 posts. What are you doing? Like, you don't have to run the Instagram. You can find someone else to do it. But people want to see that their cousin or their nephew or somebody is swimming, and they want to see it. And it just gets more people to talk about your organization. Now, obviously, it shouldn't only be about, competitions. It can be about practice. It can be about their community service. It can be a lot of things. But it's a great, social media is a great way to get in front of people's faces, right? And then, there's the typical marketing where you have a table at championship meets for summer league or something like that. I mean, those are also great opportunities to be in front of, other people from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, with the social media too, update your websites, right?
Oh
Like,
my
don't
God.
have don't have coaches on there who aren't coaching anymore, or have a pool
Yeah.
location that's, not available to your club
Yeah.
anymore. So when people go
Yeah.
there, that's kind of it. And with that, the second thing here, I think, is registration, right? Like, you examine your registration process. It should be clear and concise and easy for people to kind of do. I mean, if it's this long, confusing thing, you may lose somebody, kind of before they even
Yeah.
go, because it's like, I don't know what, this information's not clear. I don't know what to do, or it's just overwhelming for them. And I'm thinking of this too, as sometimes families, if you've got your first kid and you're getting ready to sign them up for sports and activities, it's different than someone who's maybe done this, a
Yeah.
dozen times for different things. So you want to make that easy for people to access and to navigate through. I think the third step then is your welcome, to the team. How are you
Mm.
welcoming people to the team? Um, you know, Parent meetings should be a mandatory thing, right, for all
Yeah.
families. But for those new parents, it's kind of like, here's your chance to lay out the expectations, and show here's what this team's about, and here's what the expectations are for you. So
Yeah.
how you're doing that will
Yeah.
make a
Because
big difference.
those of us who have been involved, we think it's pretty straightforward. I never thought about how, wow, it can be really overwhelming for a new parent coming in to say it's very different.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, my kids played other sports. They didn't do swimming. Well, I think coming on board to a year-round sport is a little bit, it's very different, and the commitment level is very different, and understanding what happens at practice and happens at a meet and all those kinds of things are very, and it can be overwhelming because it's information overload at first. There's a lot of clubs that are now starting to assign a parent. They have a parent representative, for each group. But I think what they should be doing is having that parent actually pick up the phone, the experienced parent, pick up the phone to the new parents and going, hey, what are your questions? Because sometimes they need to talk to a parent. They don't want to have to go to the coach or to the admin person all the time and go, okay, can you explain heat sheets to me again? I don't understand them, right? That kind of thing. So, and why do we have to be there 30 minutes early for, whatever it is. So I think having those connections that come from parents when you're trying to onboard them is really key. And it's a great way to leverage engagement right off the bat.
Yeah, for sure. And then, the next thing I think is you touched on already was just correcting your mistakes, right? Understand, hey, if this is what my membership's doing or saying, and you're hearing some kind of recurring themes, on surveys or things you're doing, those aren't going to solve themselves. So make sure that, as you have new people coming in, they're not encountering the same issues that, potentially there were in the past.
Right.
And then another thing is, I think the last step is just, you have those kids on your team, invite them back. Don't assume they're coming back. Send something out to those families that you currently have. Whether it's an email, obviously you can't call every kid or every family, but I mean, invite them to come back. Let them know that they are valued, that you love them being, part of your organization, and be a little bit formal in saying, hey, we'd love, make sure that you're coming back. We'd love to have you. That sometimes those things go a long way, and just letting people know that they're appreciated,
Absolutely.
Part of something.
Two sides of that is like at the end of the year when you're having your celebrations, like it really shouldn't just be all about like the kids you placed at the top, right? I mean, you want to see progression, you want to see performance for that swimmer, and also calling out the volunteers and the families, all of that kind of stuff. Like people really want to be engaged in an organization that they feel like they belong to and they're being recognized. So if you're constantly recognizing the parents for their participation in the work that they do, I mean, it just pulls in that engagement. And I think the other thing too is, you mentioned like, don't wait until they leave. Another survey that should be done is an end of the year survey. And, there's a lot more to that, but in that there should be a section that is, are you coming back next year? And if you are, why? I want to understand why you love us. Right. And then if you're not, why? Is it financial? Is it time? Is it too much commitment? What is it? So you truly understand, and you give your coaches and your team leadership opportunity to correct that, whether it's fixing a mistake or maybe shifting practice times or, whatever it may be, to allow for opportunities to maintain and keep your members.
Yeah. So when we were talking about this topic and doing a little researching on this, I came across the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services had a survey out. This is just a couple years old, but it was the kids aged 6 to 17 as of 2 years ago in the United States, not participating in any organized sport. So I think next time we'll break that down and say, how do we get those, that big percentage of kids who aren't participating? So looking at, how do you look at the market and potentially the what are your recruiting strategies, but the potential of what are the barriers for these people? So we'll kind of touch on some of that stuff to kind of give a little bit more guidance and break down what the recruiting process for new members would look like.
Yeah. Okay. So for today, we talked about how to retain membership, to survey in one way, shape, or form your athletes who are staying around and who are leaving, and then also to think about, alternate programming, right? So whether that's providing a recreational path or providing opportunities, other forms of aquatic programs, whether that's swim lessons, water polo, or whatever it may be. Is that right?
That sounds right to me.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will continue this conversation in the next podcast. As always, you can find more information about Your Sports Resource on our website. That's yoursportsresource.com, or you can write us at info@yoursportsresource.com. Thanks for joining us today.